My name is Charlotte Hayes, and I used to believe family could never turn against you. I believed blood meant loyalty, that the people who raised you, laughed with you, and called you sister would always have your back. I don't believe that anymore. Everything changed the day we read my father's will, the day I learned that grief can be weaponized, and that trust can die long before love does. It was a gray morning in late October, the kind where the sky hangs heavy with low clouds and the air smells faintly of damp leaves and regret. I remember the sound of my boots against the cracked pavement as I walked up to Henderson and Greenlaw offices, clutching a worn handkerchief that still smelled like my father's cologne, cedar and old books. Inside, the air felt thick with old money and formality, dark oak furniture, heavy drapes, the faint hum of an air purifier. My brothers, Eric and Daniel, were already there, sitting across from each other with identical smug expressions that made me uneasy. Eric was the eldest, the golden boy, the one who got the scholarship, the job at Dad's firm, the approval. Daniel was the charmer, the smooth talker who could spin any story and make you doubt your own memory. I was the youngest, the caretaker, the one who stayed behind when everyone else moved on. When Mr. Green, Dad's lawyer, walked in, the room fell silent. He carried a thin brown folder, its edges worn, its contents final. I tried to steady my hands, but they shook. I'd been my father's caregiver for almost 4 years. Every hospital trip, every doctor's call, every sleepless night. It had been me. Dad used to tell me, "You're my anchor, Charlie. I couldn't have done this without you." So when he died, I thought, maybe he'd left something to help me start over. Maybe. Mr. Green cleared his throat. "This is the last will and testament of Mr. Robert Hayes, dated March 7th, last year." He adjusted his glasses and began reading. The words started like a formal letter, the kind of legal prose that feels hollow when you're still mourning. But when he reached the distribution clause, everything changed. "To my daughter Charlotte, I leave my love and gratitude for her years of care and devotion. My remaining estate and all assets, including property, investments, and personal holdings, are to be divided equally between my sons, Eric and Daniel Hayes." I heard my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. That can't be right," I said softly. Mr. Green looked up, pity in his eyes. "This is the version we received, Charlotte. It was signed and notarized in the presence of 2 witnesses." Eric leaned back in his chair, smirking slightly. "Dad didn't want you burdened with all that, Charlie. You've always been more sentimental than practical." Daniel chuckled. "Yeah. He wanted to make sure you were taken care of emotionally, not financially." Emotionally, that word. Again, the one they used whenever they wanted to dismiss me. I stood up, gripping the edge of the table. "I was the one who took care of him. You barely visited. He wouldn't do this. He told me I'd be fine, that he'd made sure of it." Eric's eyes hardened. "Maybe you just misunderstood him." The sound of that sentence, cold, patronizing, cut deeper than the will itself. I left before they could see me cry. The drive home was a blur of rain and headlights. Dad's old farmhouse sat at the edge of Meadow Creek, its windows glowing faintly in the dusk. I'd always loved that house, the wraparound porch, the smell of pine from the old barn, the wind chimes Dad built himself. It was supposed to be mine someday, not because I wanted it, but because it held every memory that mattered. But by the end of that week, Eric and Daniel were treating it like their next renovation project. They changed the locks on Dad's office for security. They had his car towed for valuation. They even showed up one afternoon with a real estate agent. "Dad's estate has to be liquidated," Eric said, standing in the foyer with his arms crossed. I laughed bitterly. Liquidated? This was his home. Daniel stepped forward, putting on his fake concerned voice. "Charlie, you're overreacting. We're just following legal procedure." Overreacting. They used it like a weapon. Something broke inside me that day. 3 nights later, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Dad's voice, fragments of old conversations that didn't make sense until now. If anything ever happens, check. The box. Some things shouldn't be trusted to family lawyers. You'll understand when the time comes. I thought he'd been rambling for medication, but now it sounded deliberate. I started searching the house, quietly, systematically, every drawer, every cabinet. His desk was empty. Eric had made sure of that. But when I got to his study, I noticed something odd about the bookshelf. There was a gap behind one of the heavy engineering volumes he used to read. When I tugged it slightly, the book shifted, revealing a strip of silver tape. Behind it was a small key, taped to the back panel. It was cold to the touch, engraved with First Harbor Bank, Box 3097. A chill ran through me. That's when I remembered something else. The day before he died, Dad had tried to tell me something. He was weak, barely able to speak, but his eyes were clear. Charlie, if anything happens, make sure you check the box. Promise me. I'd thought he meant his toolbox. Now I knew better. I sat down on the floor, the key clutched in my hand, my pulse racing. Could it be? A second will? Evidence? Something he didn't trust Eric or Daniel to see? The next morning, I went to First Harbor Bank. The bank lobby was quiet, sterile, and cold. I felt out of place, still in my worn sweater, still smelling faintly of Dad's old cologne. When I handed the key to the teller, she checked the system and nodded. Yes, Ms. Hayes, we do have a safety deposit box under Robert Hayes' name. But, she hesitated, but what? You're not listed as an authorized cosigner. I can't let you access it without a court order or proof of ownership. I felt my heart sink. Is there any way to confirm it exists? She lowered her voice. Off the record, yes, it's there. And it hasn't been accessed since your father's passing. That meant Eric and Daniel hadn't found it. I walked out of the bank into the gray drizzle, gripping the key so tightly it left marks on my palm. When I got home, there was a letter taped to the door. Notice of eviction, signed by Eric Hayes, executor of estate. My hands trembled as I read it. They were giving me 3 weeks to vacate my own childhood home. That night, I cried harder than I had since the funeral. Not just from grief, but from the realization that my brothers had turned my father's death into a business transaction. I wanted to scream, to fight, to expose them, but I didn't have proof. Not yet. So I stayed quiet. I packed slowly, and every night I planned. If Dad had hidden one thing, he might have hidden more. I started checking the walls, the attic, even the basement, and then, in a dusty filing cabinet marked Archives, I found something. A receipt from First Harbor Bank, dated March 9th, 2 days after the will Mr. Green read was supposedly signed. The note in Dad's handwriting read simply, Confirmed deposit, confidential documents secured. I stared at that date for a long time. If the lawyer's will was signed on March 7th, what had Dad locked away on March 9th? Whatever it was, it didn't match their story. By the time I finished packing the last of my father's things, I knew 2 things for sure. 1. My brothers were lying. 2. The truth was inside that box. I didn't know how I'd get it yet, but I knew I wouldn't walk away quietly. That night, as the rain hit the roof and thunder rolled in the distance, I sat in the living room surrounded by boxes. I could almost feel Dad's presence there, not as a ghost, but as a whisper of reassurance. You'll be fine, sweetheart. I've made sure of that. Maybe he really had. I pulled out my laptop and began researching how to access a safe deposit box belonging to a deceased relative. There were procedures, forms, and court processes, but also something called a beneficiary access request, and if Dad had left any documentation naming me as a beneficiary, I could get in. My pulse quickened. I wasn't just a grieving daughter anymore. I was an investigator, and for the first time in weeks, I felt alive. The next morning, as I stepped out to visit the courthouse for the paperwork, I saw Daniel's car parked across the street. He was watching the house. Our eyes met through the drizzle. He smiled, the kind of smile that wasn't kind at all. I didn't wave. I just closed the door and locked it behind me. He could watch all he wanted, because this time I wasn't the emotional little sister they could gaslight. This time I had a key and a plan. The next morning, I woke up before dawn, my father's key still lying on the nightstand beside me. Sleep had been impossible. My mind kept looping through the same questions. Why would Dad have a secret bank box? And why hadn't he mentioned it in his will? The house felt hollow now, stripped of its warmth and memories. Boxes littered the living room. My brothers had ordered appraisers to assess the furniture, claiming everything belonged to the estate. Every tick of the clock echoed like an accusation. I decided I wouldn't wait any longer. If that key led to answers, I was going to find them. First Harbor Bank sat on the corner of Maple and 4th, an old granite building with green marble floors and silent tellers who spoke in whispers. When I handed over the small brass key, the clerk's polite smile faltered. "Do you have identification, Ms. Hayes?" she asked. I nodded and slid my ID across. She typed something into the computer, her fingers hesitating on the keyboard. Then she looked up, her voice soft but cautious. "This box hasn't been accessed since 6 months ago. 6 months ago. That was right before Dad's final hospital stay." My chest tightened. After signing a few papers, she led me into a private viewing room and unlocked the box. Inside was a neat stack of envelopes, a black leather notebook, and a small USB drive. The first envelope was addressed to me, in Dad's unmistakable handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. "My dearest Charlotte, if you're reading this, it means I've gone ahead of you. There are things you need to know. Things I couldn't say while I was still alive. I trust only you to set them right. The will you will hear read is not the one I signed. Someone changed it. The truth and proof of it are here. Be careful who you trust." Dad. The words hit me like a thunderclap. He knew. For a moment the world spun. The air in that little bank room seemed to vanish, leaving only a cold silence and the rustle of paper. I stared at the USB drive, my reflection warped in its metal surface. A second will. Evidence of forgery. Maybe more. But how deep did this go? I slipped everything into my bag and left the bank, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Outside, the city looked different, sharper, more dangerous. For the first time, I realized I wasn't just fighting for an inheritance. I was fighting to prove that my father's last wishes had been stolen. That evening, I returned to the house to find Daniel sitting on the porch steps, smoking. He hadn't smoked since college. When he saw me, he stood up too quickly, like a man caught doing something wrong. "Where were you?" he asked. His tone wasn't brotherly. It was edged with suspicion. "I needed air," I said, brushing past him. He followed me inside. "Listen, Charlotte, we're trying to handle things fairly. You've been under a lot of stress." "Don't," I snapped, spinning around. "Don't act like I'm crazy, Daniel. I know Dad said he wanted us to share everything." He froze. "What are you talking about?" "The will," I said. "It doesn't make sense." For a second, his eyes flickered. Fear? Guilt? Then he forced a laugh. "Charlotte, please. Dad barely knew what he was signing near the end. That was when I knew. The way his voice cracked, the quick shift to defensiveness. He was lying. "Good night, Daniel," I said coldly and locked my bedroom door the moment he left. At midnight, I sat cross-legged on the bed with the black leather notebook. My father's handwriting filled every page, careful, mechanical, the way engineers write. He documented everything, dates, meetings, conversations with the family lawyer, Mr. Lyle. And in the middle of the book, circled twice, was an entry dated February 12th, the exact day my brothers claimed he was too ill to sign anything. Met with Lyle today, signed updated will, left copy with him and one in my deposit box. Fair division, Charlotte, primary caregiver and home beneficiary, Eric and Daniel to share remaining assets equally. I sat there, numb. My father had written it down. The proof was right in my hands, but the lawyer had read a completely different document, which meant only one thing. Someone had switched the will, and that someone had access to both my father and his legal documents in those final weeks. Someone he trusted. I flipped another page and saw a name that made my stomach turn. Marjorie, uneasy about new will. Asked too many questions. Aunt Marjorie, the woman who'd been conveniently present at every family meeting since his diagnosis. The one who'd comforted me after the funeral, whispering, "Don't worry, dear, everything will work out." I stared at her name until the letters blurred. I wasn't imagining things. My family had betrayed me. The next morning, I took the USB drive to my friend Liam, a cybersecurity analyst who owed me a favor. We'd met in college, back when life still made sense. He plugged it into his laptop, scanning the contents while sipping coffee. "There are several encrypted files," he said, "but this one..." He clicked open a folder labeled Legal Archive. Inside were 2 PDFs, one titled willoriginal.pdf, the other willfinal.pdf. Liam compared the metadata. "This original file was created 8 months ago," he said, frowning, "and the final one, just 6 weeks before your father passed. But see this? The signature image was copy-pasted." He zoomed in. The difference was clear now. Pixel distortion, slight misalignment. "Someone forged your father's signature," he said, and not very carefully. I felt a rush of vindication mixed with rage. "Can you prove it?" "Absolutely," Liam said. "This would hold up in court." I wanted to cry, not just from relief, but from grief renewed. My father hadn't been paranoid or mistaken. He'd known what they were doing, and he'd trusted me to uncover it. That evening, I returned home to find Eric pacing in the living room. His tie was loose, his face red. "Where were you again?" he demanded. "I had errands." He stepped closer. "You've been snooping, haven't you? Going through Dad's things?" I met his gaze, steady. "If I am, it's because you and Daniel have something to hide." He laughed bitterly. "You always play the victim, Charlotte. Dad didn't trust you with money, and now you're spinning stories." I could smell the whiskey on his breath. "Get out of my way," I said. He leaned in, voice low and venomous. "You have no idea what you're starting." I walked past him, but his words followed me up the stairs like a curse. That night, I packed the notebook, the USB, and the letter into a locked drawer. The storm wasn't coming. It was already here. Morning sunlight spilled weakly through the curtains, but I barely felt its warmth. The house no longer felt like home. It felt like enemy territory. Every creak in the floorboards, every whisper behind closed doors, carried the weight of suspicion. The notebook and USB drive were now my lifelines, the only tangible proof that my father's final wishes had been stolen. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized something else. If my brothers had managed to replace a legal will, they hadn't done it alone. There was one person who could have made that switch possible, Mr. Lyle, my father's longtime attorney. I drove to Lyle and Associates, my father's law firm of 30 years. The glass-fronted building looked as cold and impersonal as the people inside it. Mr. Lyle greeted me with that same professional smile I remembered from the reading of the will. Thin, polite, but empty. "Charlotte," he said, adjusting his glasses, "how are you holding up?" "Fine," I said, sitting across from him. "Actually, I came because I've been reviewing some of Dad's old notes. There seem to be inconsistencies between what he wrote and the will you read to us." His smile faltered for half a second before he quickly regained composure. "Inconsistencies?" "Yes. For one, his personal notes mention a revised will, one where he left the house to me." "That's not unusual," Lyle said smoothly. "People often intend revisions, but never formalize them." I leaned forward. "He did formalize it. I've seen the signed copy, the real one." That cracked his mask. His fingers stiffened on his pen, and a flicker of panic passed through his eyes. "I don't know what you're implying, Ms. Hayes," he said stiffly. "I think you do," I replied. "And I think my brothers paid you to replace my father's will." For a long moment, silence filled the office. Then he sighed, shoulders slumping slightly, as if the weight of years had suddenly dropped onto him. "You shouldn't be digging into this," he said quietly. "It won't bring your father back." I stood. "No," I said, "but it will bring the truth back." As I turned to leave, he said something that stopped me cold. "You're just like him, you know. Stubborn. Always had to have the last word. That's what got him killed." I froze. "What do you mean?" He realized too late what he'd said. His mouth opened, then closed again. "Nothing. Forget it." But I didn't forget it. Those words echoed all the way home. That's what got him killed. Had my father's death really been natural? That night, my phone rang from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Charlotte Hayes?" a low voice said. "Yes. Who is this?" "You don't know me, but I worked at First Harbor Bank. You came in yesterday about your father's deposit box." My pulse quickened. "Yes?" "I shouldn't be saying this over the phone," the voice said nervously, "but your visit was flagged. Someone called the bank right after you left, asking if anyone accessed the box. They said they were family." I gripped the phone tighter. "Did they give a name?" "Marjorie Hayes," he said. "Look, be careful. Things like this, they get ugly." The line went dead. My hands were shaking. Aunt Marjorie, again. She must have known I'd found something. Over the next few days, I pieced together everything I could, from my father's medical records to emails Liam helped recover from old backups. The picture that emerged was horrifying. 2 months before his death, my father had changed his life insurance beneficiaries, removing Aunt Marjorie completely and naming me as executor. 3 weeks after that, he was suddenly hospitalized after a medication error. Aunt Marjorie handled his prescriptions at the time. And the new will, the fake one, appeared less than 10 days later. The pattern was unmistakable. This wasn't just forgery. This was manipulation, maybe even murder. I stared at my father's photo on the wall, tears blurring my vision. "Dad," I whispered, "what did they do to you?" The next evening, I heard the knock on the door. 3 sharp raps, confident, familiar. When I opened it, there she was, my aunt, dressed in her usual silk scarf and pearls, smiling as if nothing had ever happened. "Charlotte, darling," she said sweetly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "You've been avoiding me." I stood rigid. "I've been busy." "Busy accusing your family, I hear." She walked around the room, her eyes scanning the boxes of my packed belongings. "You've always been dramatic. You get that from your father." "Cut the act," I said. "I know everything. The real will, the forgery, the switch." She turned slowly, her smile fading. "You should stop digging, dear. It's dangerous to resurrect old ghosts." "Is that a threat?" "It's a warning." She leaned closer, her perfume heavy in the air. "Your father made mistakes. He trusted the wrong people. You don't have to repeat them." I held her gaze. "He trusted you. That was his mistake." Her expression darkened. "Be careful what you say, Charlotte. People might think grief has made you unwell." Then she walked out, calm, composed, as if she hadn't just confirmed everything with her silence. That night, Liam called again. "Charlotte, you need to see this," he said. He sent me a file he'd decrypted from the USB, a video file labeled Final Confession .mp4. The screen flickered to life, my father sitting in his study, pale but clear-eyed. "If this reaches you, Charlotte," he said, "then something has gone wrong. I've learned that Marjorie and the boys have been conspiring to alter my will. I've informed Lyle, but I don't trust him either. I've stored every signed document and digital key here. If they succeed in changing things, you'll need this evidence. Protect yourself. Trust no one from the family. I love you." Tears streamed down my face. His voice was tired but steady, the voice I'd missed every day since he passed. It was the truth, spoken from beyond the grave, and now it was proof enough to destroy them. I knew I couldn't go to the police yet, not without risking the evidence being buried again. Instead, I decided to meet with a new lawyer, Elena Morris, a young but sharp estate attorney recommended by one of Dad's old colleagues. When I showed her everything, the letter, the USB, the video, the metadata from the files, she leaned back and exhaled. "Charlotte, this isn't just forgery. It's fraud, conspiracy, and possibly assisted manslaughter." The words chilled me. "Can we prove it?" "With what you have, yes. But we'll need to be strategic. Once your brothers and aunt find out you've lawyered up, they'll panic." "Good," I said quietly. "Let them." For the first time since my father's death, I felt something stronger than fear, resolve. The storm had gathered. Now it was time to strike. For 2 weeks, I barely slept. Every night I replayed my father's last video, his calm, resigned expression haunting me. He'd known. He'd known what they were doing and still tried to protect me. And now it was my turn to protect him, his name, his legacy, his truth. Elena, my lawyer, was meticulous. Together we mapped out everything. The chain of evidence, the falsified documents, the bank records, and even the IP logs from Lyle's office that Liam traced. We built a case brick by brick, not just strong enough to expose them, but to bury their lies completely. That final blow would come at the only place they would least expect it, the will hearing extension meeting. Lyle had called it, pretending it was a routine estate clarification. But this time, Elena and I would be ready. The morning of the meeting, I dressed deliberately, a navy blazer, pearl earrings, my father's old watch on my wrist. I wanted them to see strength, not fear. When I arrived, the conference room was already filled. Lyle sat at the head of the table, his composure carefully rebuilt. Beside him were my brothers, smug as ever, and Aunt Marjorie, wrapped in her trademark silk, sipping tea as if she owned the world. "Charlotte," she said smoothly as I walked in, "I hope we can settle this nonsense today." I smiled faintly. "We will." Elena placed a thick folder on the table. "Shall we begin?" Lyle cleared his throat. "Yes, thank you, Ms. Morris. This meeting is to confirm the final asset allocations per Mr. Hayes's estate documentation. Charlotte has raised questions, which we'll address briefly before proceeding to finalize disbursement." I leaned forward. "Before we do, I'd like to submit new evidence regarding the authenticity of that documentation." Lyle stiffened. "Charlotte." But Elena slid the USB drive across the table. Contained within is a video recording from Mr. Hayes dated 3 days before his passing, along with signed and digitally verified copies of the true will. Aunt Marjorie's hand froze midair, teacup trembling. Liam's video had restored metadata proving that my father's real signature was time-stamped after the falsified version. "Play it," I said quietly. The video filled the room. My father's voice, weary but resolute, spilled from the speakers. "If this reaches you, Charlotte, it means they've succeeded in deceiving you, but truth has a way of surviving the grave. To my daughter, my executor, and the only one who never betrayed me, I leave everything I built." Lyle's face drained of color. Aunt Marjorie's teacup shattered against the table, porcelain scattering like broken promises. My brothers sat frozen, unable to breathe. The silence afterward was suffocating. Elena broke it first. "This video is verified authentic. The original metadata confirms it was created on the 17th, 3 days after the will your firm filed, Mr. Lyle. We also have proof of financial transfers from Ms. Marjorie Hayes's account to yours that same week." Lyle's hands shook. "That's ridiculous." Elena clicked again. The next file opened. A series of bank statements, all neatly highlighted. $50,000. Wire transfer from Marjorie Hayes to Lyle and Associates Trust account. Memo. Finalization of will. A low gasp rippled around the table. Marjorie tried to recover. "That's a donation for his services." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Forgeries and bribery now qualify as services?" I turned to face her. "You stole from a dying man, from your own brother. You thought I'd let it go because you treated me like the weak one." She glared at me, mask slipping. "You were always ungrateful. Everything your father gave you was out of pity." "Then I guess pity pays better than greed," I said, "because now you've lost everything." The meeting disintegrated into chaos. My brothers began shouting, accusing each other of leaking the secret. Lyle demanded a recess. Marjorie tried to storm out, but Elena's paralegal blocked the door. The police were already on their way. I just stood there, calm amid the storm, watching the empire of lies crumble. When the officers arrived, they escorted Lyle out first, his face pale and defeated. Marjorie followed, her defiance gone, muttering under her breath about ungrateful children. One of my brothers, Ethan, looked at me across the room. "You set us up," he hissed. "No," I said softly. "You set yourselves up the moment you thought I wouldn't fight back." It took months for the legal process to unfold, but justice, Slow as it was, came. Lyle's firm was dissolved. He faced criminal charges for fraud and conspiracy. Marjorie and my brothers were forced to return the misappropriated funds and pay restitution. The estate was restored in full. Every document, every title, every asset, back under my rightful care. But the victory wasn't about the money. It was about something deeper. For years, they had silenced me, dismissed me, told me I was naive. Now I was the one who had silenced them with truth. A few weeks later, I stood by my father's grave again, this time not in grief, but in gratitude. The air was cool, the wind whispering through the trees. "I did it, Dad," I said softly. "They'll never use your name again, not for their lies." I placed a folded letter beside his headstone, a copy of the restored will. His signature, clean and unbroken, felt like closure. With the estate secured, I turned my attention to what mattered most, rebuilding what they had tried to destroy. I renovated the family home, keeping the study exactly as my father had left it, books, globe, and all. It became a small memorial, a space of memory and peace. I also started a small foundation in his name, the Hayes Truth Initiative, offering legal support for families facing estate fraud and manipulation. It was my way of turning pain into purpose, silence into strength. When the first case we funded won in court, I cried, not out of sadness, but because I knew, in that moment, I'd finally kept my promise. People often ask me now, how did you stay calm? How did you not lose yourself in revenge? The truth is, I almost did. There were nights I wanted to scream, burn everything, make them suffer the way I did. But I realized something. Real revenge isn't anger, it's peace. Letting them watch you rise when they expected you to crumble. That's justice. And so, I rise. Every day. If you've ever been betrayed by your own family, I want you to remember this. Their power ends the moment you stop believing their lies. You don't need their approval to be strong. You only need your truth. Have you ever had to fight for your own voice when everyone tried to silence you? Tell me in the comments. I read every story because I know how much courage it takes to speak. If you think they got what they deserved, comment karma below. And if you're a survivor and a fighter like me, drop a "because we rise together"